The dusty main street of Dodge City usually buzzed with the mundane rhythm of frontier life, but today, an unsettling hum replaced the familiar sounds. It was a murmur, a whisper carried on the hot wind, growing louder with each passing hour. The source of this disquiet was not a distant raid or a new gold strike. It was far more intimate, far more disturbing. It centered on Elias, the old rancher whose weathered face told tales of endless toil and solitary living, and his young bride. The words slipped from one tongue to another, catching like wildfire, his granddaughter. The sheer audacity, the unthinkable nature of such a union, hung heavy in the air, stifling any sense of peace or ordinary daily joy. This wasn't the kind of news that brought a smile or promised future happiness. The town was gripped by a collective gasp of disbelief. Minds struggled to grasp the reality of it. What grim circumstances, what twisted logic, had led to this unimaginable bond? What hidden desperation had paved the way for such an abomination? The community, once a beacon of rough-and-tumble camaraderie, found itself fractured by this bewildering secret, an unholy alliance that stole the simple joy from their days and replaced it with a creeping dread. One couldn't help but wonder what true sadness lay beneath the surface of such a shocking revelation. Sarah arrived at the sprawling, dust-laden ranch, a tumbleweed caught by a cruel gust, utterly adrift and without an anchor in the world. Her young life, abruptly severed from its roots, left her an orphan, vulnerable, and completely devoid of prospects. She was a fragile, bewildered child, tossed onto the unforgiving currents of existence with nowhere to turn. The vast prairie surrounding Elias's homestead mirrored the immense emptiness in her small heart. His hands were calloused, his face etched with lines of sun and sorrow, his eyes holding a profound, aching loneliness few noticed. He had lived a life devoid of companionship, his days an endless cycle of cattle, crops, and frontier survival. The absence of genuine connection, of shared moments of joy or familial happiness, had gnawed at him, leaving a void even his vast land couldn't fill. This deep-seated isolation subtly, insidiously twisted his perception of family and how true security could be attained. His understanding of wisdom, of what was right, became clouded by his desires and the desperate need to fill the gaping hole in his existence. Conventional notions of kinship and protection, once clear, were slowly distorted by his profound solitude. He saw Sarah not merely as a lost child needing shelter, but as a potential solution to his overwhelming emptiness, a way to construct a semblance of the family he craved, regardless of societal boundaries or her true welfare. His desperate longing overshadowed moral clarity, paving the way for a dangerous, unthinkable proposition, twisting his own definition of security into something monstrous and self-serving. He believed, in his warped logic, that she could bring him a distorted kind of fulfillment, and that his needs were paramount. In the deep, isolating quiet of the ranch, where Elias's own profound solitude resonated, his vision of family and security had grotesquely warped. He saw Sarah, a fragile orphan, not as his granddaughter but as a desperate soul adrift in a world he believed unforgiving. He began a calculated, insidious campaign, slowly eroding her already fragile spirit by preying on her inherent fear and desperate need for safety. He painted a chilling picture of the external world, a society without mercy, inevitable destitution for a girl with no means, no family, no strong male protector. This destiny, forged in desperation and isolation, irrevocably bound her to an unimaginable life, a cruel perversion of family, a tragic mockery of what a future should be. Sarah's life on the sprawling ranch settled into a monotonous rhythm of silence and quiet strangeness. Each morning dawned with the same heavy stillness, the vast expanse outside offering no solace, but rather a stark reminder of her profound isolation. The days bled into one another, unmarked by any laughter or genuine connection. Her routine was a silent ballet of veiled anguish, tending to small, solitary chores, eating meals in an oppressive quiet, and retreating to a small room that felt more like a cell than a sanctuary. The very air seemed thick with unspoken burdens, a constant pressure on her young spirit. She moved through the house like a specter, her presence barely acknowledged, her voice rarely used. The concept of happiness had become an abstract notion, a distant memory or a story whispered in a forgotten dream, entirely absent from her bleak reality. There was no joy in her existence, only the slow, relentless passage of time, each hour a testament to her profound unease, a life devoid of personal wealth or inner richness. Though miles separated the ranch from the bustling heart of Dodge City, the town's silent judgment felt ever present. Sarah felt its gaze even when unseen, a collective condemnation that permeated the very air she breathed. She knew the whispers followed her, turning into cold stares during her infrequent, brief trips for supplies. The averted eyes of women, the sudden cessation of conversations as she passed by, the barely concealed curiosity mixed with disapproval from shopkeepers. All of it confirmed her fears. She was an anomaly, a scandalous exhibit, and the weight of that perception intensified her already profound isolation. She acutely felt the pervasive weight of their curiosity and thinly veiled condemnation, a burden that pressed down on her spirit. There was no joy to be found in these essential outings. Yet, amidst the town's clamor, in a modest shop filled with colorful fabrics, resided Martha, a seamstress of quiet wisdom and deep empathy. Martha had observed Sarah on a few of these infrequent visits. She saw past the scandalous rumors that swirled around the young woman, recognizing instead a profound sadness that emanated from Sarah's very core. It was a sorrow far deeper than common unhappiness, a persistent ache, an absence of joy. Martha, with her unassuming wisdom, understood that true wealth lay not in possessions, but in the peace of one's spirit, a peace Sarah clearly lacked. One particular afternoon, as Sarah completed a purchase, her gaze inadvertently lifted and met Martha's across the counter. There was no judgment in Martha's eyes, no hint of the town's pervasive gossip. Instead, Sarah was met with a gaze of profound understanding and genuine concern. It was a look that acknowledged her hidden anguish, a silent recognition that seemed to pierce through the thick veil of her solitude. In that fleeting, shared moment, something inside Sarah subtly shifted. It was an almost imperceptible loosening of the knot of despair that had tightened around her heart. This simple, empathetic connection, born of Martha's quiet wisdom, offered Sarah the first true flicker of hope she had experienced in what felt like an eternity. It didn't promise immediate change or an instant return to happiness, but it offered a profound sense of not being utterly alone. It was a quiet revelation, hinting at a different kind of wealth, the value of human kindness. For Sarah, this unexpected glimpse of understanding was a fragile lifeline, a subtle promise that genuine support might exist, and with it, the possibility of a more dignified future. The quiet hum of Dodge City, usually a cacophony of ambition and rumor, now held a softer undercurrent for Martha, the kind-hearted seamstress. She had seen the weariness etched deep in Sarah's young eyes, a sorrow that went beyond simple hardship, hinting at a profound loneliness and an unspoken burden. Martha understood that direct confrontation or overt gestures would only intensify Sarah's isolation and potentially endanger her. So, she chose a path of gentle, almost imperceptible compassion, relying on her years of quiet observation and the simple wisdom of human connection. Her approach was as delicate as the finest lace she worked with, aiming not to confront the public spectacle surrounding Sarah, but to reach the girl's spirit, which seemed to wither under the weight of judgment. The next time Sarah ventured into town, her basket clutched tightly, as if shielding her from unseen arrows. Martha was ready. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic interventions. Instead, as Sarah stood hesitantly before Martha's counter, ostensibly to purchase thread, Martha offered a small, knowing smile. It wasn't a pitying look, but one of shared humanity. She might gently suggest a fabric that would brighten Sarah's somber attire, remarking on its resilience, perhaps even offering a slight discount without making a show of it, a discreet act of charity that bypassed the usual transactional nature of their exchange. Martha's words were carefully chosen, simple observations about the changing seasons or the quality of a stitch, yet beneath their surface lay an unspoken message of care. She might mention how a strong spirit could mend any tear, subtly conveying that Sarah possessed such a spirit, even if she couldn't yet see it herself. These were not moments of lengthy conversation, but fleeting connections, brief instances where the warmth of Martha's presence enveloped Sarah, if only for a few moments. Sarah, accustomed to averted gazes and whispered condemnations, initially found these interactions confusing. She braced herself for the usual chill, but instead, a quiet kindness permeated the air around Martha. It was in the way Martha's hands lingered slightly longer when passing back change, or the genuine concern in her eyes when inquiring about the ranch, not out of gossip, but out of a subtle interest in Sarah's well-being. This genuine concern was a rare commodity in Dodge City, and for Sarah, it was a breath of fresh air in a suffocating existence. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, a tiny crack appeared in the wall of despair that had encased her. Martha understood that Sarah needed more than just material comfort. She needed her sense of self-worth restored. The seamstress subtly praised Sarah's quiet strength, noting how she managed the journey to town alone, or the neatness with which she presented her meager list of needs. These seemingly trivial comments carried immense weight for a young woman who had been systematically stripped of her dignity and autonomy. Sarah began to realize that perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't entirely invisible or entirely defined by the scandalous union forced upon her. This was the nascent seed of courage, a quiet blossoming of self-recognition that began to offer a glimmer of potential happiness. The true wealth Sarah was beginning to discern wasn't in possessions or social standing, but in the rare gift of human connection and the silent support offered by a kind soul. Martha's quiet wisdom showed Sarah that even in the bleakest circumstances, there could be pockets of joy, a subtle promise that a better future, filled with true self-worth and genuine affection, was not entirely out of reach. The realization dawned on Sarah that she was not as utterly alone as she had believed, and this subtle shift in perspective began to ignite a flicker of hope deep within her. The discreet acts of kindness were more potent than any grand declaration, slowly nurturing a sense of value in a spirit long neglected. The small, almost imperceptible kindnesses from Martha had begun to chip away at the formidable walls Sarah had built around her heart. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but a slow, steady dawn breaking over a landscape long shrouded in twilight. Martha's quiet understanding, the knowing glances, the gentle words of encouragement that seemed to float on the breeze only when no one else was near. These acts, so subtle yet so profound, planted a seed of courage within Sarah's barren soul. She began to realize her existence wasn't predestined to perpetual anguish and silence. There was a faint, almost imperceptible whisper of hope, a gentle suggestion that a different path, a life unbound by the suffocating weight of her current circumstances, might actually be within reach. This glimmer of possibility, fragile as a spider's silk, strengthened with each passing day. Sarah found herself spending hours lost in contemplation, gazing out over the vast, empty plains that stretched beyond the ranch house, no longer seeing only the endless, isolating expanse, but imagining horizons where she could breathe freely. The idea of autonomy, a concept so alien for so long, started to take root in her mind. It was a powerful thought, to make her own choices, chart her own course, live a life dictated by her desires, not by manipulative words. She yearned for a future where she could define her own terms, find true happiness, not just as an elusive dream, but a tangible reality. This wasn't about vengeance. It was a deeper yearning for dignity and self-worth. The path forward was still unclear, fraught with unseen obstacles, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Sarah possessed the internal compass to begin navigating, even if just one small, silent step at a time. Sarah had finally gathered the profound courage nurtured by Martha's subtle kindness, a quiet resolve that had solidified deep within her. The time for living in the shadows of fear and obligation was over. With a newfound firmness in her posture and a clear, unwavering gaze, Sarah approached Elias. Her voice, though soft, carried an undeniable authority as she declared her decision to leave, to sever the ties that had bound her to a life of silent anguish. This was not an appeal or an argument, but a statement of unshakable will, a definitive reclaiming of her own destiny. Elias, confronted by this transformed woman, was rendered speechless, his usual domineering presence collapsing under the weight of her quiet conviction. He could only watch as the frightened girl he had once controlled dissolved, replaced by a spirit determined to forge its own path. Unknown to Elias, Martha had meticulously laid the groundwork for Sarah's departure. Through her quiet network, discreet arrangements were made, and a safe, welcoming space awaited Sarah in the vibrant heart of Dodge City. As Sarah walked away from the ranch, leaving behind the suffocating memories of her past, she felt a potent mix of trepidation and burgeoning exhilaration. Each step was deliberate, a conscious movement towards an unknown future where the possibility of genuine happiness no longer felt like an impossible dream, but a tangible horizon. This profound act of self-liberation, of stepping into her own agency, was a declaration of independence, a shedding of years of enforced silence. More profoundly, Martha offered an emotional anchor, a consistent source of belief in Sarah's inherent goodness and potential. Through Martha's unwavering encouragement, Sarah began to grasp that the true wealth she sought was not material, but lay in the genuine connections she fostered and the integrity with which she lived. Moments of pure joy began to pepper her days, small bursts of light that affirmed her progress. With each small victory, each earned penny, each newfound friend, she began to truly flourish, chipping away at the old wounds and embracing a profound sense of self-worth. From the ashes of her past, she gleaned an invaluable wisdom, understanding deeply the power of resilience and the quiet triumph of the human spirit. Sarah's story, once a hushed scandal whispered through the dusty streets of Dodge City, eventually transformed into something truly remarkable, a powerful testament to the unyielding spirit of human resilience. No longer defined by her past ordeal, she emerged as a symbol of courage, embodying the capacity to transcend the darkest circumstances. With each passing day, as she meticulously built her new life, Sarah found her voice, a voice silenced for so long, and with it, rediscovered her inherent dignity. The very community that had once judged her with such harshness slowly began to view her through a lens of profound respect. Her quiet determination, the strength she demonstrated in every step forward, resonated deeply with those around her. This wasn't an overnight miracle. It was a gradual, arduous journey, paved with small victories and unwavering support. Martha, true to her compassionate nature, remained a steadfast pillar in Sarah's life, a friend who understood her past while continuously pointing her toward the promise of her future. Through this profound journey, Sarah unearthed a deep inner happiness, a quiet contentment that blossomed from genuine freedom. She understood, perhaps more acutely than anyone, the immense value of autonomy and the liberating power of choosing one's own path. Her life became a living lesson, radiating a quiet wisdom that touched many. This wisdom, born of hardship yet tempered with hope, taught others about the enduring strength of the human spirit. Her narrative, stripped of its initial sensationalism, offered a poignant lesson to all. It spoke volumes about the critical importance of self-worth, the undeniable truth that every individual possesses intrinsic value regardless of circumstances. Crucially, it highlighted the transformative power of genuine community empathy. The initial ostracism Sarah faced eventually gave way to understanding and acceptance, demonstrating how collective compassion could heal wounds and foster an environment where even the most vulnerable could flourish. Sarah's existence became a beacon, proving that true wealth lay not in material possessions, but in richness of spirit, character, and pure joy found in living an authentic, dignified life. She had not only survived, but thrived, crafting a future filled with promise, proving that from despair, one could rise, reclaim their narrative, and inspire a world to look beyond prejudice toward true human connection. Her journey was a timeless reminder that while darkness may linger, the light of resilience and human connection will always find a way to shine through, illuminating the path to a brighter, more dignified tomorrow.